Welcome to BDubz DM21. I'm BDubz, and this is a New World build concepts video. The build you are about to see is purely conceptual and theory crafted based on information gathered from the closed and open betas. These have not been tested, and all skills, passives, and other details are subject to change as we head into launch. This build guide is purely to convey the concept of the extremely robust custom class system New World introduces, and to hopefully provide you some direction when you make the journey to Aeternum. Today, we build the Warden, a support class designed for people who like to yell, "This is Sparta!" Built for both PvP and PvE, originally conceptualized by Hype Gamer. Without further delay, let's get to the build. So the Warden build today that we're going to be going over is considered a support class that we want to talk about because everybody talks about playing DPS, tank, heals, and guess what? In the world of Aeternum, you also have your support roles. Now, what is a support role? Many of you guys might be wondering. Well, it is a class that is designed with the pure intention of making everybody else in your group shine that much more brilliantly. And that is the big deal today with the Warden class that we'll be going over, conceptualized by Hype Gamer. This is going to be a sword and shield and as well as a spear build. We're going to begin by looking at the sword and shield. This class is designed to be used in heavy armor, and yes, can be used in both PvP and in PvE content. However, I will stress this is probably more favorable towards the PvE content, where this particular gamer who brought us this build, which we refined and put together a little bit better, is quite frankly, he's probably going to be doing a lot more PvE. I don't know how this will work in PvP. Again, this is all conceptual, but I think that this build will make all of the people out there looking for that support role a bit happy today. So let's go ahead and get into it. The first thing is we got to talk about how we are going to be supporting the group and why this build allows us to do that. The very first thing we look at here is a little skill here called leadership. Just by being in the party and having a sword and a shield equipped, you will give everybody in your group a 10% damage bonus. Now here's the really cool part. In the closed beta, I had someone in my group who had the leadership perk unlocked. And what this does is no matter where you are in the map, so long as you are actually in a group with this player, you will actually get this 10% damage bonus. So if everybody's off doing their own thing, one person maybe off in Weaver's Fen, another person hanging out in Brightwood, and you got someone over in Cutlass Keys, and maybe someone else in Morningdale, or what have you, right? You're all going to get this buff. Now, this might have been changed since the closed beta. I do not know, but that was how it worked throughout the entirety of the closed beta. So this is our first big support role type ability. The next thing that we're going to be doing in order to support our group is apply a rend debuff using the skill Perforate. Perforate skill is basically a triple strike, which you would intend to put in the back of the NPC or the player that you are fighting. And when you upgrade it with the Rupturing Strikes passive, you apply a 10% rend per strike on targets that are above 50% health. Now, it's going to be 5% after it's below that 50%, but even then it's a 15% rend. So now we aren't just only increasing everybody's attack power by 10%, but we are also rending the armor of the target by 30% when above 50% health, and then 15% when below 50% health. Very big deal here, because when you rend armor, it basically renders the target more vulnerable to all sources of damage, which basically effectively increases the damage that everybody provides. So just by having this class in your group, you're going to do exceptionally more damage. And when played correctly and you are focusing a target, say for example, a expedition boss, you are going to do so much more damage across the whole party. It's going to be a touch ridiculous. You bring this class in if you have an awesome group of DPS and they want to hit even bigger numbers. That's right, if you want to make the numbers go big, bring this guy and he'll do it for you. Let's go ahead and break down the details of each and every single skill and passive that is a part of this build. So initially you might be wondering, hey, BDubz, why are we going Shield Rush instead of the Leaping Strike? I'm going to be completely honest here. The Leaping Strike, I think, is a very, very poorly designed skill. Sorry, Amazon Game Studios, but it is, and it needs work. Here's why. The difference between Leaping Strike and Defender can be pretty difficult to see at first. Both do 125% weapon damage. One is a 6-meter leap, and the other is a 5-meter leap. Yet we are favoring the 5-meter leap, and there's a couple reasons for this. First, the Leaping Strike is considered a thrust ability, where the Shield Rush is considered a strike ability. This is two different types of damage. Now in PvP, most people know that the largest sources of damage that are going to be on them is going to come from spears, it's going to come from bows, muskets, it's going to come from the rapier, and it's going to come from repeaters. All of that is thrust damage. So if you're gearing for PvP, most people know, hey, I need to put on thrust wards on my gear to keep that damage from hurting me as much. That's a pretty big deal. The only other thing at this point that can damage you to that degree would probably end up being fire magic. Actually, that is probably the most potent weapon in the game, is the fire staff. But since it's just one weapon versus 5 different weapons, including the repeater, we really need to try to mitigate that type of damage. So if I know in PvP people are mitigating thrust damage, then I'm going to want to give them the strike damage. There's only a few sources of strike damage in the game, one of them being the Warhammer, and I believe cannons do strike damage as well. Most people won't be mitigating for that damage type because so few weapons actually do strike damage. The next thing is that the leap, although more longer in range, this happens to have a 5-second longer cooldown. It's harder to hit because thrust attacks have a narrower hitbox than strike attacks, and then its passives leave much to be desired. The first one is if you hit a foe below 30% health, deal 50% more damage. This sounds something helpful on the surface, but the truth is that this is typically used as a gap closer or an opener to a rotation. So since it typically occurs at the beginning of the battle, you're not going to get that damage up percentage. Now maybe when you're chasing somebody down and they have their back to you, but you're already getting critical damage. So I really think that at that point, if they're running, yeah, I suppose it might come in handy, but we'll see. And then the next one is something called Cowardly Punishment. If Leaping Strike hits a target in the back, cause slow for 8 seconds. Now, the thing about this is that it has the conditional that it must hit the target's back. One of my big concerns about people wearing heavy armor is that they connect with somebody, but then that somebody's in light armor and they just roll away and we'll never see them again. Now, Hype Gamer mentioned that he really wanted to do a lot of damage towards large groups of mobs with this build, and so we gave him the Whirling Blade. If you want to take the Shield Bash to try to also help keep people nearby, then I do recommend that. It's a nice skill. But we'll get into Whirling Blade and why this is actually going to be helpful later. But my point is that this passive is not going to give you the ability to keep light armored people near you. It's going to be quite challenging to even land this in the back. You'd have to wait for them to turn around or maybe get the jump on them for this to trigger. So because both of these passives are so incredibly situational and does not happen all the time, we have to consider what the Shield Rush does. Now the Shield Rush with its strike damage has a larger hitbox and it makes it easier to land. Now it's only 5 meters, so we got to be a touch closer, but it's on a 20-second cooldown, 5 seconds shorter than the Leap Strike cooldown. Its first passive is, on successful hit, all enemies within 5 meters gain 10% weaken for 4 seconds. This means they hit weaker. This is actually a really good mitigator for you. The less damage they do, the less damage you take. Makes pretty good sense to me. Let's continue. Intimidating Rush, on successful hit, all enemies within 5 meters are 30% slowed for 4 seconds. Whoa. No conditions need apply. If you just hit something with Shield Rush, you will apply a 30% slow for 4 seconds. Now, granted, it's 4 seconds versus the 8 seconds of the cowardly punishment, but this is also an AoE now. This will apply to slow to anybody or anything that is within 5 meters of you. That is a very wide radius. So if you're in a PvP situation, you got a group of folk, you want to get them slow, you can get them slow. And this thing works really good. The same thing even in a PvE situation when you have a lot of mobs come at you out of nowhere and they're running after different people because someone isn't controlling the mobs very well. Well, guess what? No big deal. They're slow. They're easier to catch, easier to beat down. This is a really good skill. I highly recommend Shield Rush over the Leaping Strike in every situation. And yeah, Leaping Strike, unfortunately, it just never seems to be the right answer in any situation. Definitely go for the Shield Rush. The next skill we're going to take is the Whirling Blade. Now, we talked about this a little bit already. Whirling Blade has a few issues with it. It's not my preferred choice, but because we're trying to blend a PvP and a PvE build into one, I would say the Whirling Blade isn't too bad of an idea here. This will give 145% weapon damage to all foes within 2 meters. Now, 2 meters is not that big of a radius. If you want an idea of what the 2 meter radius is or what it looks like, if you've ever seen defensive formation, that's the defender ultimate, right? When they hold up the shield and you see the circle go around the defender there, when you see that, that's 2 meters. That is also a 2 meter radius. Now, anybody who's ever tried sharing that 2 meter radius defense block from this defender knows that it's really tight. There's not a lot of room to move. That tank needs to be standing still in order to for you to really reap the benefits of that damage reduction along with him. But it is very important to note that that is the radius. So you will need to be fairly close with Whirling Blade in order to do the damage. The next thing is that Whirling Blade will cause a 5% rend for 10 seconds. Now, as we've already discussed, rending is part of why we want to play this build. This move applies a 10-second rend on top of the perforate rends that we are doing with the spear. That's a really, really big deal. Now, this is on a 15-second cooldown, but we're going to reduce that cooldown. We'll talk about that later. So this essentially is giving us a 10 out of 15-second window of rend, which increases everybody's damage against this target. Again, very good support-oriented role, very good support-oriented move and passive here. This helps us accomplish the mission that we're setting out to do with this build. That's another rend. So now we can get up to 35% rend on a target who is 50% and above on their HP bar. The next thing we get, Whirling Blade reduces cooldown on the ability by 10% for each enemy hit. Now, that means even one enemy will reduce the cooldown by 10%. So it's really going to be a 13.5-second cooldown. But there will be other ways we can reduce our cooldowns as well, which brings us to our next ability. This is the Reverse Stab. This is your most powerful ability in the line. This is going to be the one that's going to be your bread and butter damage dealer, and you're going to want to make sure you hit this, and you're going to want to make sure that this is a critical hit. Hit the target's back if you can with the Reverse Stab. This also has grit, so nothing's going to stop you from making this attack once you begin it. And finally, on a successful hit with the Reverse Stab, all sword cooldowns are reduced by 25%. Pretty good. That's going to bring our Whirling Blade with the one hit against the one target or more. If you're able to hit more than one target, that's going to bring our Whirling Blade down to below 10 seconds, meaning in the sword and board phase stance, you're going to be able to apply this 5% rend every 10 seconds. So the Whirling Blade actually helps us do that support role. That's the reason why we are taking this on this particular build instead of the Shield Bash. Now, for PvP purposes, I would recommend Shield Bash. It's a 3-second stun, one of the best stuns in the game. But this is meant to be well-rounder group support for both PvP and PvE, so therefore I agree with the pick. Let's take a look at the passives next. We have Empowered Stab, successfully Successful heavy attacks grant you 30% in power for 5 seconds. Now we're getting into our rotation. How is our rotation going to look? Well, that's a very good question. If we're going to open with the shield rush, then we're going to heavy attack, then we're going to whirling blade, and finish with a reverse stab. That's what the rotation is going to look like. A couple other things we're going to be doing here. The Achilles heel, the final attack in your light attack chain, causes a 20% slow for 2 seconds. Very handy in PvP if you're able to get this off. That is going to provide a slow, probably something you can apply as your shield rush slow is about to run out. So you're going to do that full rotation followed by a light attack to keep your target within melee range. The next thing we have is sword critical chance increased by 10%. That's a no-brainer. We want that one. Successfully hitting with a heavy attack will cause you to lose 1 debuff. This is very handy in pretty much any and all content. I cannot tell you the number of PvP videos that I have seen where people get stuck with a poison arrow, or they're burning, or they're bleeding, and they have no clue they have the debuff as their health bar slowly ticks away as they're trying to run away from the attacker in PvP. It's ridiculous. People don't even realize they have the debuff, or they don't know how to get rid of the debuff. Well, the awesome thing is that our heavy attack on this build will cleanse us of this debuff. It's a very, very good weapon skill and a very good passive to have. Anything we can do to get rid of those poisons, those burns, any of that stuff will be very helpful. That's a good passive. The next one is counterattack. Now, naturally, as someone who's in heavy armor, you're going to get attacked by quite a few people, particularly rapiers comes to mind. That will absolutely destroy you if they get in and get unmitigated attacks against you. You're going to be blocking these attacks. So the good news is that as we block these attacks, we gain an empower called counterattack, which gives us a max of 15% empower bonus. That's actually really good for our damage, and if you need to block attacks in PvE content, you're being rewarded with an empower that gives you stronger hits. We like that. That's good. We're going to take it. The next one, opportunist, deal 10% more damage to slowed foes. Well, what do you know? We're slowing foes all the time. We're slowing them with the shield rush, or we're slowing them with Achilles heel. This gives us a damage bonus to our reverse stab, not to mention the empower we get from the heavy attack that we're going to do. This is really nice. An additional 10% damage to slowed foes. Yes, please. We'll take it. The next one that we're going to be talking about is critical precision. On critical, gain 20% haste for 5 seconds. This is important. You should always be attacking the back of your opponent if you can. Attacking the back of your opponent will not only result in a critical hit now, but now you will also get a haste. It's a 5-second haste. And if someone is running away from you, they turn their back and they're trying to run and you get the hit, hey, you picked up haste. A 20% haste. That's a really good strong haste for a good 5 seconds that will allow you to stay close and be sticky to your opponent. A very, very good passive. We want this. We need this. We already discussed leadership, 10% damage bonus for your entire party, no matter where they are. It's amazing. So long as you have the sword and board out, they have the buff. It's awesome. Now on to the next one. Defensive training. When you block an attack, gain 10% fortify for 5 seconds. Very handy. Since we are not a fully committed tank, and you are in heavy, you're not going to be able to dodge out of too many things. So being able to block as your primary defensive mitigation method of choice, this is actually a really nice thing because it enables you to get a 5-second window where you have 10% fortify. More armor equals less die, and we don't like dying. I don't know about you. Next one, we have final blow. The third attack in your light attack deals 30% more damage, and it causes more threat. Well, we don't want to cause threat. That's not our big deal here. We're not a tank. We don't want to be a tank. You should not have a Carnelian gem equipped into your sword if you are playing this build. That's not why we're taking it. We're taking it because we are already doing light attack combos as part of our rotation, so we might as well get that extra damage bonus at the end of the combo. More damage equals more kill, more die, and that's good. So that's what we're going for there. All right, guys, that is the sword side of the tree. Now let's get into something a bit more exciting. And I think the spear is very exciting because when we think about having two weapons, a lot of times people forget, gee, what am I doing with these two weapons? I don't get it, right? I mean, I guess I switch between the two when stuff is on cooldown, or, what's the methodology here? Well, the spear is something that we are not going to want to have out that much. Because when we have the spear out of our hand, we are no longer giving the leadership bonus. So if we're going to have the spear in hand, we're going to need to apply as much support and damage as we can, and this is passive damage over time damage, so we can switch back to our sword and shield and give that buff back to our teammates. If we don't give them that buff, they're not going to hit big numbers and they're going to be big sad, and that's not good. We don't want big sad. So here's what we do. We have two abilities. The first one, two abilities on this side. We'll talk about Javelin here in a minute. We have two abilities on this side. This one's Skewer. This one is a gap closer. It enables you to get close into your target in position to begin your perforate. The added benefit here is that we're going to do damage and we're going to apply a bleed. Now this is going to be a 10% weapon damage, which will be applied every second for 10 seconds. So it's going to be about an additional 100% weapon damage, like one tick of 10% every second for 10 seconds. That's pretty good. This is basically a 225% weapon damage attack. That's awesome. We like this. This is really good. The next one, 20% damage against targets that have full health. This is probably not something we're going to be able to do very often. As a support in a dungeon, we're probably not going to be the first one to hit a target. However, it's good to have in the back of your head that, hey, I'm the first one to hit this target. Maybe I should go ahead and use Skewer, right? So we can get our deadly ambush. It's pretty good, but that's not why we're going down the line. This one, gain in power on critical hits, increasing damage by 20% for 10 seconds. Well, this is great. You should always use Skewer on the back of your opponent. Now, we're talking about PvE content here, where your tank pulls the boss, and then you come up behind the boss and then hit him in the back. Pretty easy to apply your critical hit, right? Right, perfect. So now you got Empower on critical hits. So on the back, which will increase your damage by 20% for 10 seconds. Awesome. The next one is we're going to do a deep wound, which will now increase our bleed duration to 15 seconds. So this means that we're now applying 10% weapon damage every second for 15 seconds, which equals 150% weapon damage. In this particular state, when you have this unlocked, the bleed damage actually hits harder than the initial strike damage. This is really good. And this is damage that's occurring over a 15-second period of time, meaning you are doing spear damage while you have your sword and shield out, because he's bleeding, the target's bleeding. This is great. You're doing spear damage while your sword and shield are out. That dot is ticking away, and you're out there with your sword and shield giving a buff to everybody. This is awesome. What a great concept. I love it. Next up, Perforate. Oof, okay. This one's pretty difficult to land all three hits on your own in solo, and especially in PvP. This one is kind of a rough skill to use in PvP. I'm going to be real with you. It is. You're going to need some CC on the target in order for you to land this. But this is more or less for your big boss that you're fighting in an expedition. And this is to provide support to your team. Now, look, if you're fighting a tank in PvP and someone's got them CC'd and you can land the Perforate, this dude's dead. This thing is sick. It is disgusting. We've already discussed this at length already, but remember, this is giving us a 30% rend. Imagine ripping off 30% of somebody's armor. Now it's gone. That heavy armor set that they're very proud of and they're very happy to have, yeah, you just chewed it up and threw it away. It's awesome, right? And then you give everybody 10% damage bonus. So yeah, this guy's going to get hurt. That's the point. Remember, you need to land all three pokes of the Perforate. Okay, this is going to give us a 30% rend, and if you successfully land all three hits, it will stagger the target. This is all very good. Now, the next thing we need to talk about is the Javelin. I have a few reservations about Javelin, and I very rarely recommend it to people. However, the Javelin is a very visceral skill. It's very satisfying to use, and when it lands, you will laugh. You will laugh, you will laugh, you will think it's the funniest thing you've ever seen. because what this thing does is it chucks your spear at a target, and if you get a headshot on it, it's particularly funny, and you just see the target fly about 4 meters away and hit the ground real hard. Now, the reason why I don't necessarily like this skill is because when I'm in a group with other people who are aiming at a target, they're trying to shoot their shots, they're trying to land their skill shots, and I just come over and chuck my spear at them and throw them across the room, my friends are going to miss their shots. And they're going to be very mad at me, even though they'll be laughing hysterically at what happened to the poor sucker who got hit by this thing. So be very careful when you use this, especially in PvE. This is really more meant for PvP, because at this point, any CC will be appreciated by your group. No one will get mad if they miss a skill shot because you knock someone across the room and knock them down. That just makes it easier for us to get the guy, right? Yeah, we like this. This is good for PvP, and this is basically our way of being able to close the gap in a worst-case scenario where we just can't catch the guy. Well, here we go. We have a way of catching the guy. You need to land this, though, if you're going to use it. Now, here's the thing. Forceful impact. That is not a lie. This passive name is 100% accurate. It's amazing, and I like it. So, forceful impact. Love it. Next up. Refreshing precision. Headshots reduce cooldown by 50%. So, if you get that headshot, yeah, you're going to reduce the cooldown of this thing by 50%. I definitely do recommend aiming for the body because you would rather just get the knockdown so you can get to the target and beat them up. But if you can land the headshot, do it. Next up, plus 2.5% damage per meter traveled up to a 100% damage bonus. That's pretty good. That's going to be 250% weapon damage for this skill if you're hitting it from fairly far away. That's 2% per meter. So if you hit this thing from 50 meters away, one, you're a sharpshooter, my goodness. But two, you're going to be able to get this. Now, hitting from 50 meters away is just never going to happen. I honestly think they should shrink this bonus down to 25 meters. Well, okay, it's 2.5, so it's actually shorter than I think. Probably more about 35. I can't do math, guys. You'll learn this. Anyways, you get the idea. It's shorter than 50 meters, so thank goodness they did shorten that quite a bit. But if you hit this thing from a far distance, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt a lot. It's a beautiful thing. Let's get into the passives. We're going to start on the right side of the tree, on the Impaler tree. Let's go to Refreshing Jabs. All spear cooldowns are reduced by 10% on the second hit of the light attack chain. Now, this isn't something that we should be using too much, but if you are not with your group, or maybe playing solo, or maybe you really want to make sure you have your cooldowns, you want to follow up your skewer and your perforate with 2 hits to get the cooldown shorter, you can do that. That's a good part of your rotation. The next thing you can do here is 15% damage against targets of less than 30%. This is really, really good, and the reason why is because we need to do something to offset the loss of the rend for targets who are below 50%. Because your rend will only be half as effective on targets who are below 50% health. So when they get below 30, then we're at least getting 15% more damage for ourselves. It won't be as good as the full-powered rend, but it is good enough. Next up, aggressive maneuvers. The first successful hit with any ability within 2 seconds of dodging will reduce all spear cooldowns by 20%. So you might want to dodge before doing your abilities. Now, this is any dodge. So if any first successful hit with an ability within 2 seconds of dodging reduces all spear cooldowns. So do the spear. You would want to do your skewer and then do your dodge roll and then into a perforate in order to reduce the cooldown of skewer, which is 15 seconds. So that's probably a decent idea, but anything we can do to reduce our cooldowns, that will enable us to keep the debuffs up and running longer. That's a good thing. We want it. We'll take it. The next thing, 15% critical chance against targets with bleed. Well, what do you know? We're making them bleed. That's a good thing. We'll take it. And the next one, exacerbating crits. Critical hits extend the duration of your spear debuffs and damage over time effects by 20%. Ooh. Nice. I like it. We'll take it. Very good. Next one. Exploited weakness. This is 10% damage per debuff on target. 30% max. Oh. Well, what do you know? We're providing a bleed and 3 stacks of rend. Not to mention the fact that if you're playing in group combat, which you are, because you're a support, you should be in a group all the time in this build, then yeah, you're going to get more damage for your debuffs. That's great. That's really good. I like this. This makes me happy in so many ways. Let's go to the next one. Deadly Reach plus 10% critical chance on attacks against targets that are 3+ meters away. This is something that is very helpful to give us a critical hit chance for our Javelin. This is very helpful for that. It's also helpful for your Skewer, not necessarily so helpful for Perforate. But we did want to take this one because any critical chance increase is good for us. We'll take it. Next one, restore 20% stamina, 20 stamina on critical hits. Yeah, we needed to take something in this line, and since we're not knocking down targets with sweep, this one seemed less likely to be needed. So grabbing the stamina here felt good, and yeah, we're going to take it. Overall, the spear part of your rotation should be short. For the most part, you're going to want to have sword board in your hand. So when we switch to spear, you're going to quickly skewer right over here. And then you're going to follow up with a perforate to the back. And then you're going to immediately switch weapons back to sword and board, right? You go back to sword and board. If you're already in melee range, begin with a heavy attack, followed by a whirling blade and a reverse stab. If the boss or somebody, whoever it is you're fighting, goes away from you, shield rush in. It's pretty self-explanatory. We do our light attack combo to give them a slow, and then we rinse and repeat this process, making sure to reapply our perforate every 12 seconds. And our skewer every 15 seconds. So really what you can do is take a look at the bleed debuff on the enemy, and when that begins to run out, switch back over to spear, reapply your skewer, then reapply your rend. All right, you're going to reapply your perforate. Try to get all 3 hits in, and then back to sword and board. So we're only using the spear to apply our cooldowns and then switch back. You need to optimize your time in the sword and board rotation in order to give your party this beautiful leadership buff, which makes everybody feel nice and dandy as they hit those big numbers like they've never seen before. And that is the Warden build. I like it. Hopefully you like it. If you guys would like to see more conceptual builds, be sure to head on back over to BDubz. I'll be right here. And in the meantime, guys, stay safe out there, keep the faith, and game on. See you next time.